Okay. Hi, and welcome to today's talk in the MSIS Social Science Data Lab. We're very happy that Lisa de Vries is with us today and present about surveying diversity, integrating queer perspectives in survey research. The Social Science Data Lab is an event series here at the Mannheim Center for European Social Research, where scholars present tools and methods for the collection, analysis, and visualization of data in the social sciences. Our today's speaker, Lisa, is a research associate at the German Institute for Adult Education in Bonn, and she holds a PhD from Bielefeld University. Her research focuses on labor market discrimination, sexual and gender diversity, the measurement of sexual orientation and gender sex, and surveying minority groups. In today's workshop, Lisa will give an overview of different methods, opportunities, and challenges of integrating queer perspectives in survey research. Based on practical examples and personal experience, she will provide insights into the measurement of sexual orientation and gender identity, sampling methods for reaching LGBTQI people, and questionnaire design beyond heteronormativity. Please note, we are recording this live stream in active speaker mode, so the audio from on-site and remote attendees will be recorded. And if your video is on, for those of you joining online while asking a question, your video will be recorded as well. So thanks for joining today, and hand over to you, Lisa.
Thank you very much. As mentioned, the title of my presentation is Surveying Diversity, Integrating Queer Perspectives in Survey Research. And as also mentioned, I did my PhD at Bielefeld University with a focus on labor market discrimination of LGBTQI people. And one main problem as we started our project on the topics was to get data about these population. And today I will share some experiences. Yeah.
If you click the last ones on the slide.
Yes, thank you. And before I start, I will tell you a little bit about the current situation of LGBTQI people and about research challenges and data gaps. And then I will go to the question how to measure sexual orientation and gender or sex, and how to increase survey experience for LGBTQI people. And then I have 3 examples of surveys that I was involved: the ZUB-Q sample, LG Bielefeld 2019 and LG Bielefeld 2021. And then I will sum up a little bit and we can discuss about the topics that I mentioned. But before I start, I will want to make sure that we all are on the same page regarding the terms that I use in my presentation. I used already the term LGBTQI, what's an umbrella term for lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, inter, queer, and other gender and sexual minority people. Sometimes I also use the term sexual and gender minority people, so I use both in my presentation. And I have a little figure to explain this a little bit. It's a gender unicorn. It's more used in a practical way, but I think what's good in this figure is that what we can see here is that we have 2 different concepts. The first is sexual orientation, and the other concept is sex or gender. And both concepts are connected or are in interaction sometimes, but it's important they are not the same. Sexual orientation is not sex or gender. And both concepts, sexual orientation and sex gender, have different dimensions. For example, these are only examples. There are a lot more dimensions, but for example, we have gender identity. Here's a little rainbow. It's a self-identification. For example, it's male, female, non-binary, and so on. Then we have gender expression, how I express my gender to the outside. For example, with clothes or something like this. And then we have sex assigned at birth. For example, in Germany, we have male, female, diverse, and no entry right now. So these are examples for sex or gender. And then we have also sexual orientation. For example, the physical attraction to other people or the emotional attraction to other people. So we have a lot of different dimensions here, and yeah, we will see later on. Of course, there's not one way to measure all of them, so we need different items to measure different concepts of sexual orientation and sex gender. The second point that I will mention before I start with the topic of the presentation is the question, how many people are LGBTQI? Because this is a question that I got mostly asked if I tell people about my research topic, and it's not an easy question, but what I can say about this, that it depends on, for example, where you ask. What I hear is from an OECD report. It's self-identifying LGB, lesbian, gay, and bisexual people in different countries. And what we see is that the percentage of LGBT people differ between countries. And it's also the same for the percentage of non-binary people. Also, we have differences between countries. And it depends also on when you ask, because what we see here, also different countries to different time points, and we see an increase of the percentage of LGBT people over time. And I think what's important here is that also the context matters. That means the legal regulation in the countries and also the social acceptance or discrimination experiences in different countries and over time, because not all LGBTQI people are willing to disclose their sexual orientation and gender identity in surveys. So here's a little bit the question, are there really differences in the population, or is this maybe a difference between surveys? And the next point is that it also depends on what you asked. We have here in blue, sexual self-identification as LGB. In gray, any same-sex sexual behavior. And in lighter blue, any same-sex sexual attraction. And also here we see differences between the measurements. That means the measurement decide how many people we can identify as LGB. And the last point, it depends also on who you ask. This is an example from the US, but a lot of surveys found this in the last year, that a lot more people identify as LGBT in the younger age cohorts. And here also the assumption that this is affected by societal circumstances between the cohorts. But now, and of course, data quality is also something what I would mention here, that it's important on the question how many people you can identify as LGBTQI. But now, very short about the background. What is the current situation of LGBTQI people? At first, I think you can have a look on the media in the last days or weeks or months, and you find that there's a lot of going on right now. We have some legal changes in some countries. In some countries it's getting better, in some countries not. There are some current articles about an increase of LGBTQI hate crimes and violence in different countries. And of course, the situation in the US will challenge the situation for LGBTQI people again in the next weeks, months, years, we will see. And of course, there's also research on these topics. For example, an OECD study found that 36% of LGBTQI people have faced discrimination in the past 12 months. 14% were attacked in the last 5 years. one very often researched topics is differences in earnings. This is based on a meta-analysis, and they found that gay men earn 7.4% less than heterosexual men, and LGBTQI people have a higher risk for depression and other mental health illnesses. And what we also found, if we have a look on the global perspective, is that overall, this is based on 193 countries, and overall we have an increase in the legal situation for LGBTQI people. We have field protection rights, for example, employment protection or broad protection against discrimination for LGBTQI people. And here we have recognition rights, for example, same-sex marriage or adoption rights. And what we see here is over the years, more and more countries introduce such rights. For example, in 1981, Norway was the first country that introduced protection against incitement based on sexual orientation. Then we have Denmark in 1989 that recognized same-sex partnerships as first countries, and the Netherlands in 2001 that introduced same-sex marriage as first country. And in 2023, for example, we have same-sex marriage legal in 32 countries, and 82 countries had legislation on work protection for LGBTQI people. But still, same-sex acts are illegal in 61 countries. They are punishable by death in 7 countries, and current research indicates an increasing polarization and backlash of LGBTQI legal rights and also acceptance of LGBTQI people. Here's a short overview about, this is some kind of equality index for LGBTQI people. The index measures legal rights situation in the countries and public attitudes toward LGBTQI people. And what we see here, red is less equal and green is more equal, that we have huge differences between countries. And on the next, we see also differences over time. This is only acceptance of LGBTQI people, and between 2010 and 2020, overall we see an increase of the acceptance. But what we also see based on this is that the most accepting countries are becoming more accepting, and the least accepting countries here becoming less accepting. So we have also some kind of polarization here based on this research results. So overall, we have discrimination and also a lack of acceptance or the legal situation of LGBTQI people, and also some changes in the past decades, and this current polarization and backlash on these topics. Now about research challenges and data gaps. I have a figure about social science journal articles and project founded by the DFG between 1999 and 2023. And what you see here is that there's a lot more research on ethnic origin or gender than on sexual orientation and gender identity. So this is a very not so often researched group compared to the other groups that face discrimination or disadvantages in several life domains. And one reason for this is the current data situation that not allows so many about this group of LGBTQI people in many countries. And of course, the data gap is even higher for specific subgroups or topics. For example, there are not so much data on intersex people or older LGBTQI people. And there are some reasons for this. For example, one reason is that items regarding sexual orientation and gender identity are rarely included in probability-based and longitudinal surveys. Probability-based random sampling techniques are often less effective for this minority group. And so the number of LGBTQI people is often too small for statistical analysis. Of course, for qualitative data, it's something else. There's a lot more qualitative research on the topics, but in the field of quantitative research, there are not so many studies because there's not so much data available for this group. And here's an example how gender or sex was measured in the most surveys in the past. And as you can see, there are mostly two answer categories. In the most surveys in the past, there were only the answer categories male and female. And often the interviewers don't ask the people about their sex or gender. They're indicated based on the physical appearance of the people. So they guess the gender of the people. And of course, if you have only two answer categories and a guessed gender, then you will not have gender minorities in your surveys. I think in many surveys right now, they included the diverse category in Germany, but diverse is the legal entry for intersex people. And so often non-binary or transgender people don't use the diverse category. So I think it's better than only two answer categories, but it's not very inclusive for transgender or non-binary or other gender minority people which don't identify with a diverse term. So now the question how to measure sexual orientation and sex or gender. And as I mentioned, two different concepts, very important to have this in mind if you think about how to measure it. And for sexual orientation in research, there are mainly three different dimensions that were measured in the past or currently measured. The first is sexual identity, the self-identification as, for example, heterosexual or bisexual. The second is the sexual attraction to people of the same and or different genders. And the last one is the sexual behavior as sexual activity with people of the same or other genders. And the dimensions do not necessarily have to match, and changes over time are possible. I think there's sometimes the assumption that if you have a panel study and you ask one time about sexual orientation, that's is it enough? But I think the most or previous research show that there are changes over life in some cases, so you have to ask one time about the sexual orientation to get this data. This is one example for an item on sexual identity. The question is, which of the following best represents how you think of yourself? And then we have different answer categories, for example, lesbian or gay, straight or bisexual. Sexual attraction is often asked in this way. I feel sexually attracted to, for example, only to females, never to males, more often to females, and so on. And sexual behaviors often measured with this item. I have had some sexual experience only with females, never with a male, and also some other answer categories. And here again important, if we compare the different items, we have different percentage of LGBT people because we measured different dimensions here. I think for social science research, the sexual identity is the most common measurement of sexual orientation. And though I have two examples for this measurement, the first example was used in the ZEP. I think the first time in 2016 and then again in 2019. And what we see here is 4 different answer categories: heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, and no answer, prefer not to say. In the German context, homosexual is used as a term. In the US or UK context, they prefer mostly gay or lesbian, and homosexual is not often used. So I translated it. So I used homosexual, but I think in the US and UK context, it's not common to use this term. And what we have here is short explanations about the different terms, because the assumption was that not all people of the that are aware of the term homosexual or bisexual and so on. And what we also see is a no answer categories. I think it's important because it's a sensitive question for some people, and so a no answer category makes sense. This is another example that we integrated in the FREDA panel. There was the open call for items, and we integrated, based on this call, the sexual orientation or sexual identity. And we also have different answer categories and also an open answer field. I think this is quite useful because we have not only homosexual and bisexual people, we have also other sexual orientations. And we have here also the category B or pansexual for the FREDA study. And the last one, it's an example from our LGBT study. It's an online survey only with LGBTQI people. And so we decided to use a little bit more answer categories because we have different sexual orientations in the sample. And I would say more answer categories are especially used for surveys with the community. And we also changed the order of answer categories because we assumed that more people are gay or lesbian, bisexual or pansexual than heterosexual. So we changed the order for this survey. And what we see here is an overview about different measures of sexual orientation based on different studies. And we have the non-response rate. And I think one fear of survey providers is that a lot of people don't answer questions on sexual orientation or will drop out. And what we see here, that the non-response rate is okay if we compare it with other sensitive topics. So it's not so high as many as maybe expected in some surveys. To sum up this examples on sexual orientation, I think the first important point is that you are aware of the different dimensions of sexual orientation and decide based on your research interest or your research question what dimension do you want to measure. The second is you should use different answer categories to allow diversity in your survey. Maybe you should explain the terms if you think it's needed for your target population, and then use other category and also the answer option, no answer. And then, of course, adapt the terms from your target population and be aware of changes over time or between countries or regions. I think in the US, other terms are used than in Germany. So be aware of that, and also changes over time in the terms are very common. And then, of course, do a pre-test of your survey before using items the first time. Now about the measuring of sex and gender. As I mentioned, for a long time, sex and gender was usually measured by the question, what is your sex? And then these two answer options, male or female. But we have different dimensions of sex and gender. Biological sex dimensions, the sex assigned at birth, gender identity, gender expression, and something like ascribed gender. And so you have also here to decide what is the research question or research interest, and what concept or what dimension do you want to measure in your survey. And I think for social science research, the gender identity is the most common or mostly the most useful measure of sex or gender, because for questions on inequality or discrimination, I think this is one of the most important points. And there are two different ways that are currently used. The first is the one-step approach. It's using a single item which catches gender diversity. For example, the question here is, and which gender do you identify with today? And we have different answer categories: male, female, non-binary, trans, other gender, no gender, and no answer. This is an example of our LGBT study. And I think here the order of the answer categories also depends on the target population, but in the most cases, you will have more male and female people in your survey than other gender identities. So in most cases, you can make this on top. Even in our community surveys, we had mainly male and female people. And of course, also here an open answer field, and also no answer category, because this is also for some people a sensitive question. And the second way to measure gender and also sex here is a two-step approach. The first item is the same, an item on gender identity. And the second item is the question about sex assigned at birth. And the reason why researchers often measure both is that transgender people often identify as male or female, and so use this answer categories here. But if we want to identify them as transgender, we can use the item on sex and have a look on which people have a male sex assigned at birth and a female gender identity, for example. I think it's only necessary if you want to identify this group of transgender people. Is it not your research interest or something like this, and you don't need this? But I think if you're interested in this group, then it's a good way to measure it. Because in our surveys, most transgender people don't use this category and use male or female or also non-binary as answer categories. And these are examples of results of our studies, JobQ, LGBT 2019 and LGBT 2021. And as you can see, with the one-step approach, we only identified 2.0 trans people in the ZEP, but with the two-step approach, 4.1 transgender people.
Can I ask a quick
Yeah.
question on that? So if you were to divide the group of trans people up into, so the above, right, would then be cis men and cis women, and if you divided trans into trans men and trans women, would those numbers correspond more strongly between the one-step and two-step methods?
I think in our study we have more trans men than trans women, but I think it depends.
Right, which would then resonate, right, that you have a higher or decrease in the percentage of people identifying as male between the one and the two-step method.
Of
Yeah.
course, yeah.
Okay.
Then then we see, okay, some of these male people are transgender. Yeah. And we found the same for our online surveys, that we could identify more transgender people with the two-step method. One problem is maybe here that some people don't understand why we have different questions on sex and gender and maybe don't answer them right. This is maybe a problem. You can, of course, ask afterward a question if you have people which say, okay, I have a male sex assigned at birth and a female gender identity. You can ask, okay, again, okay, are you sure about this? Is this your right answer? This would be an option to make sure that all people understand the questions right. And these are some, sorry, it's in German, but these are some recommendations of us for measuring sex and gender with the two-step approach. And we have one first example that we should, what we think should be the minimum for asking on sex and gender. And we would say, okay, you need male and female and at least one other category. And then also the options no gender and no answer. And if you are willing to do more and have more diversity in your survey, it depends also on your target population. You can add more categories, for example, non-binary or transgender. So we think this other category is mainly necessary if you want to measure gender. But if you want, you can, of course, include more categories. I think, especially for big surveys like the Vries study or the ZERP or something like this, there is the question how people who are maybe a little bit older and not so involved with the terms of the LGBTQI people will react to some terms like non-binary or transgender. But if you have at least this other category, all people will understand it, and LGBTQI people have the possibility to indicate their gender in this category. And in the most cases, based on our experiences, the coding of the answer categories are not so much work, of course. It is some coding afterwards, but most people use then non-binary, transgender, and so on, and you can easily code the answers. Of course, there will be all the time some longer answers that are harder to code, but the most answers are easy to put in a coding scheme. And mention this, there's also the opportunity to use only an open answer field. We use this also in our LGBT study and asked, what is your gender? For example, woman or agender, and the people can use this open field. And then we coded the answers in these 9 categories: male, female, non-binary, trans, inter. are gender or no gender, people who are unsure about the gender, and people who mentioned more than one categories. Some of the people indicate that they have more than one gender, for example, trans and male, or inter and non-binary, and so on. And so we built a category for this people and used then dummy variables to code them. And I think there are also some surveys that allow for more than one answer for the gender question is also possible. And then, of course, outside the scope, for example, unclear answers, some troll answers, or some commentary how to measure gender. In most of our surveys, respondents had also some ideas how we could measure gender, and then they used this open answer field to indicate how we could measure gender. Yes, sometimes helpful, sometimes not so helpful. Okay, I think the recommendations are nearly the same as for sexual orientation. Be aware of the different dimension, use different answer categories that allow for diversity, explain the terms if you need this, use other and no answer categories, and of course, be aware for changing terms over time and your target population of the survey, and do some pre-test before going into the field. Okay, the next point is how to increase survey experience. And I think there are some easy ways how you can increase the survey experience for LGBTQI people. For example, you can make the start of the survey more inclusive for LGBTQI people. And you need often only a few small steps for this. For example, include diversity in the invitation of the survey. For example, if you use advertised photos, then use more diverse photos that also include LGBTQI people. And not only heterosexual couples, or for example, if you have a survey on families. The next one is address survey participants in a gender neutral way. For example, hello instead of dear sir or madam, and omit Mr. and Mrs. from the letterheads that you have for your survey. And the last one, avoid using incorrect pronouns. I think it's very important that you don't misgender the people in your survey. Some online surveys right now ask for your pronouns at the beginning of the survey, and then they used it for the whole survey. This would be maybe an opportunity. The second possibility is to avoid using pronouns. It's also possible for the most surveys, I think. And the next step is using items and answer categories that cover the living circumstances of LGBTQI people, especially regarding partnership and marital status, family life and family of choice, and also the topics health and medicine. And for example, make sure that all legal possibilities of partnership are included in your questions. Or for example, this was a question of our Q sample, and we asked, what is your relationship to this child? Are you? And then there are the options biological mother and biological father. This were the regular answer categories. And we added this answer category, second social mother or second social father for same-sex couples, to make sure that also same-sex couples that maybe are not the adoptive parents of the children have the possibility to say, okay, I'm a parent of these children. I'm not the biological or adoptive or foster parent, but I'm a parent of the children. And the next point are ethics and also data protection. I think it's important for every survey, of course, but we have with the LGBTQI population, a population that is not so big, for example, compared to women or men or something like this. And we have populations that experience a lot of discrimination in our society. And so I think about ethics and data protection is very important here. Moreover, gender and sexual orientation are sensitive questions for certain groups of people. That means place them on a good part of your questionnaire. We often place them near the partnership questions because we think it makes a little bit sense to talk about partnership, family, and then about sexual orientation and or gender. Yeah, it depends on your questionnaire, but maybe it's not good as a first question, for example. And so think about what is a good place in your questionnaire for those questions. Only ask if you think it's necessary. If you don't need this information on sexual orientation, for example, then you don't have to ask it. But if you need it or think it would make sense, then of course you can ask these questions. Then, of course, regarding data protection, this is also an issue, and especially for smaller surveys, for example, in companies or something like this, or also universities sometimes have surveys with employees and want to ask for sexual orientation or gender identity, but in some cases it's a little bit tricky because you have not so many employees in your institution, and make sure that in the results you don't can see what person maybe is behind the data. And especially also relevant when you want to publish the data, and of course for younger people also. And I think it's in the most studies common sense right now to contact an ethics committee, for example, at your university. And I would say, especially for this topic, it makes absolutely sense to contact the ethics committee and maybe ask if they approve your study or your planned study, or they have maybe some suggestions that you can, how you can improve your survey regarding ethics and data protection. Okay, now I will present you 3 examples of sampling approaches. I think one main problem, I'm not sure if it's a problem, but is that in the EU, most countries or most data collection in countries relies on non-probability and self-identified sexual orientation and also gender or gender identity. And so we have not really a sampling frame for this population. In Germany, we have not really numbers how many LGBTQI people are here in our country. And this makes it a little bit complicated to have probability data for this group of people. Of course, in some way, it protects the LGBTQI community to don't collect too much data of this population, but for research, it makes it a little bit complicated. And probability sampling is maybe the way to go if you want to have good data, but for this population, often not possible. And the number of LGBTQI people in probability samples is often not so high, and then you can don't run your models or analyzers. So what options we have? I think the first would be give up survey-based research on this topic. I think it's not the best way to go. The second is try to sample as probability-based as possible. And the last one, maybe using other methods to collect your data. And here, a very short overview about different studies in Germany. Here's the data source, for example, microcensus, ZÖP, and some studies on sexuality. And what we see here is that we have very different percentages of LGBTQI people in the different data sources. For example, for the microcensus, we only can identify same-sex couples that live together in one household. So this is, I think, microcensus is often used to set a sample frame or to rate your data. You also often use the microcensus, but for this population, it's not very good because we have only same-sex couples in the microcensus and not other parts of the LGBTQI community. So this makes probability-based data a little bit complicated. In the past, different methods are used, for example, snowball sampling. I think convenience sampling is very often used. For example, go to LGBTQI bars or pride events and collect the data there. Collaboration with LGBTQI organizations. Some organizations are very active in data collection and also have their own surveys, so it makes sense to work together maybe to collect data. And online convenience sampling in the last years, it was more common to use this method. And the first what we did in our research project was a boost sample of LGBTQI people that we integrated in the socioeconomic panel. I think most of you have heard of the socioeconomic panel. It's one of the largest and longest running household surveys, and a lot of people are in the yearly. And in 2019, we did this boost sample of LGBTQI people living in Germany. And we did the recruitment via random telephone screening. That means a lot of people get a call from the institute, from the research institute, and they ask them about their sexual orientation and gender identity. And if they are part of the target population, then they were asked to get part of the ZÖP. And maybe here I have the results of the random telephone screening. We had overall 75,000 screening interviews. From this, 21,000 don't want to answer our questions. And then we had 2,800 LGBTQI people in the target as a target group, and 1,000 of them are willing or were willing to participate in the ZÖP. Some don't want to give us the contact information, but overall we end up with 835 people. And we also had some false positive screenings, people that maybe don't understand the questions on the telephone. So we end up with this number of people. And I think what you see here is that, of course, you need a little bit money for this, because a lot of people get a call from the institute, from the telephone interviewers, and so it's not so cheap to do this method. But now we have a lot of or more LGBTQI people in the ZÖP, and increase the analytical potential of the ZEP for this population. And I think it's quite nice. You have to pay once, and then you have this people on a yearly basis in the ZEP. And yeah, nearly 500 households, but mostly we had lesbian, gay, and bisexual people. Only 23 people are transgender and 15 people with another gender identity, for example, non-binary. So most of the people are LGB. And of course, the rating is a little bit complicated because we have not really information of the microcensus or something like this. We use design rates and non-response rates, and that it is. Yeah.
In that case, did you use the two-step or the one-step approach to identify?
This is based on the two-step approach.
Two-step.
Yes. Yeah, not so many gender minority people, mostly lesbian, gay, and bisexual people. And because the number of cases, especially of gender minority people, was not so big in the ZEP-Q sample, we thought, okay, it would be cool to also make an online survey with maybe a lot more people in it. So we did it, an online survey with LGBTQI people in Germany in 2019. We did the recruitment via ads on Facebook and Instagram, and you can choose some target parameters by using these ads, and so we go for gender, location, and age, but yeah, I'm not sure if it's so necessary. And we had a little bit of focus on LGBTQI parent families, because we have some interest in the topic. And overall, we have nearly 6,500 interviews, completed interviews. And 28% live with children in their household. That means we have also some families in our sample. Important how expensive it was, and I think in comparison to the ZEP study, very cheap. Overall, we paid 2,700 euros for the ads on Facebook and Instagram. That means 42 cents for an interview. And this is an example of our ads. We used some photos, for example, with community symbols, and also with couples and families, because this was our main interest. And here you can see a lot of people saw our ads. Some people clicked on the ads, and so we end up with the number of interviews that we had. And of course, some people that was in our survey were not LGBTQI, but I think the number is not so high, so it's okay for this method. Because also in this survey, I'm not sure, no, it's not, but also in this survey, the number of gender minorities was not so high. And so we decided to do it again in 2021, not as a panel, two different cross-sectional surveys, but with the same method. We did an online survey, but more with a focus on gender minority people. And also the recruitment was on Facebook and a little bit on Instagram, but Instagram don't work so good for this survey. So we used mainly Facebook and had a focus on gender minority people. Overall, we had 7,332 completed interviews, and 7% are transgender and 12.8% are non-binary or have another gender identity. And this is higher as in the 2019 sample. But this was a lot more expensive than the 2019 survey. The problem is a little bit with Facebook and Instagram. You don't have really an overview why it's sometimes more and sometimes less expensive. You don't get so much information about the algorithm, so it's a little bit a black box what is happening here. So it was more expensive than the 2019 sample. And in our ads, we try to use also pictures that are especially relevant for gender minority people. And we not only used ads on Facebook and Instagram, we also tried different methods to sample people which are not so effective, but also cost no money. For example, Facebook posts on our Facebook page, Facebook posts in Facebook groups, for example, some LGBTQI groups or transgender groups and so on, posts on subreddits on Reddit, some links in our Instagram bio and so on. So we tried different methods and of course also got some interviews here, but not so much compared to the other methods. I think the ads on Facebook and Instagram are a lot more effective than these methods. But if you want to go for a smaller survey and don't need this higher sample size, maybe this could be also interesting methods to collect data on this population. This, for example, is a group post on Facebook with different pictures and a little text about our survey and why it's important to be part of the survey. And nearly the same, the invitation post on our Facebook page. And this is an example for a video on Instagram that we used. But the main point about our data, this is in comparison of our LGBT 2019 data and the ZERP-Q data. And I think this is not so relevant. I think what's more important is the age and the education. And as you can see, of course, in our online surveys, we had a lot more younger people than in our ZERP study, and also higher educated people in the online surveys. So we have, of course, some data bias here because we use Facebook and Instagram. I'm not sure how many young people are on Facebook right now. Maybe this changed a little bit since 2019 or 2021. I think maybe now are mostly older people on Facebook, but I think on Instagram or TikTok or something like this, you will have more younger people in your data. So to compare it a little bit, so you have something like probability-based data. You have a cis heterosexual comparison group, also good to have, but this would be also possible for our online survey if you target also this population. In such big surveys, you have, of course, some questionnaire limitations because questionnaires, time in the questionnaire costs a lot. And so we had, of course, some restrictions from the ZERP, how many questions we can use and how many time we have for our questions, because we integrated also some questions on discrimination, for example. And of course, we had a lot more questions than we could integrate. For our online survey, we was a little bit more free to integrate questions on discrimination and so on, but of course also some limitations because you could not make an online survey for 1 hour or something like this, then you will have a lot of dropouts. SERPU needs more time and a lot more money. For the online survey, you have faster results. I think the recruitment, the field phase was 1 month for each survey. And afterwards, of course, you have to prepare your data and so on, but it's a lot faster and also cheaper. But you have some data bias, of course. And but what is also good, I think you have better opportunities to target some subpopulations, for example, gender minority people, or also older LGBTQI people could be a possibility. Yeah. So both methods have advantages and disadvantages, of course. And for our publications, we used in some cases both data sets and weighted our LGBT data based on the ZEP frequencies. So to make it more comparable to each other. To sum up this a little bit, the key messages that I have based on our experiences with the topic is, of course, we have a high relevance of the topic. There is an exclusion of LGBTQI people in surveys, and we have often incomplete data and little information about this population in many countries, not only in Germany. And but the aim should be for survey providers and also for researchers to do low discrimination research and surveys, and to also include LGBTQI people in surveys, and also mapping the social reality, and so try to also integrate this group in the surveys. There are different possibilities for measuring sexual orientation and sex or gender. There is not one easy way. I think this is a very common question that researchers have. Can you say, please, one easy item to measure sex, for example? I think there is not one easy way, but there are various quite easy possibilities to measure sexual orientation and gender identity in your surveys. Use different answers categories and other categories that allow for sexual and gender diversity. And of course, consider the target population of your survey research. Moreover, the survey experience can be increased, for example, with an LGBTQI friendly start, or a good questionnaire design would also include LGBTQI people. And ethics and data protection are very important. And about the different sampling approaches, there are lots of methods. Of course, we have not so much information on the population, but you can use, for example, convenience sampling and so on to get data about this population. And yeah, you have to think about what you need for your research questions. Okay, last point. If you're interested in data about the topic, our ZEP sample is available with a ZEP. You can use it if you work on a university or research institute or are a student, then you can use the ZEP data. Our LGBT data are also available. You only had to fill a short form and then you will get the data. I was involved in 2 of this call for item groups that included sexual orientation in the FREDA panel. I think the data are available right now, and the gender and generations and gender survey. I think the data will be available soon, and we have only also data on LGBT rights. So if you are interested in this kind of data, you can write a short email to me and my colleague Anna Kamann. So thank you for the attention, and I'm excited for the discussion.
So we're ready to work with time for questions.
Do you feel like currently with the state of the United States, with Meta owning Instagram and Facebook and kind of being in cahoots with Trump, do you feel like online survey data will change in the way that you advertise? Because you said that it was primarily Facebook and Instagram. Do you feel like surveyors will go to different avenues currently?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but
yeah.
What do you think the avenues will be, or do you think that there will just be an overall decrease in online surveys, just period?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think, of course, there are 2 points. The first is, will it be possible to make online surveys with these topics on Facebook and Instagram in the future? I'm not sure if if it's allowed, maybe in the future, especially in the US right now. And the second point is maybe the trust of LGBTQI people, if they give answers online on Facebook or Instagram, it maybe could be also a big issue, and maybe a lot of people don't want to answer online surveys about such sensitive topics in the future. So yeah, of course, this is a challenge that will be a future challenge for us. And I think maybe we have to look for other possibilities to make some surveys. Maybe this convenient sampling via LGBTQI organizations are then the way to go. But yeah, it's will be a challenge, of course. And there's also some developments, of course, in the USA regarding the research about the topic. I think a lot of researchers are not able to do research on these topics right now in the US. So it's also a big problem, because a lot of research about discrimination of LGBTQI people are from people of the US. And of course, this is also a challenge for the future.
Thank you very much, Lisa. This is super helpful and informative and important work. So I have one question, maybe a second one. The first one, and I'm sorry I have to ask, is about the legal side when it comes to the GDPR. So we've recently had a discussion about when you think about the various categories that fall into LGBTQIA, what is entailed by Article 9 of the GDPR and what is not, right? Because I just pulled it up. So it says processing of personal data, revealing, and then there's a number of categories which include a natural person's sex life or sexual orientation shall be prohibited under certain, unless you take certain measures that protect the anonymity of people. And in a way, this does not include gender, right? But I fully agree that being in a minority, so non-binary category, can be and likely is for most people a sensitive piece of information. So I understand that ethically speaking, one should treat it as sensitive data, but can you say anything about the legal side of things?
I'm not sure if I'm the person to make some legal statements here, because I'm a social scientist and not so into the legal regulations right now. Yeah, but of course, that is something that you have, of course, consider if you do some surveys. You have to check the legal situation in your country and so on. And for example, in the ethics committee of the University of Bielefeld, if you say, okay, I make a survey about sexual orientation, then you have every time to make a long statement why you want to do this and what is your research question. And I think for other questions like binary gender or labor market situation, you don't have to fill a full form, but for some sexual orientation or also gender identity questions, you have go the long way with your ethical statement or ethical improvement.
And my second question would be, since you also mentioned that you asked people for feedback on items, so you had open text prompts, are there any forms of measuring both sexual orientation and gender identities that are clearly preferred by members of the respective minority communities, or what's opinion divided?
There is an article by, I don't forget the name, but they did some community surveys and compared different methods to measure sexual orientation and also gender identity. And I think they, for example, varied the number of answer categories, open answer field or no open answer field. And it depends really on the target population, I think. And yeah, overall, I think it's important that you have some diversity in your answer categories, but also not too much answer categories. They, for example, tried also 15 answer categories or something like this. And for many people, also people of the LGBTQI community, they said it was too long. And a lot of people like this open answer field because you can write whatever you want in this field. But of course, as researcher, you have to be prepared to do the coding. And I'm not sure if it's easier to categorize people after they gave their answer or to choose categories before they give the answer. So it's also tricky to code them into categories after you have the answers. I think it really depends on the population, and there were some samples, for example, discrimination study at Bielefeld University, and they used this open answer field for gender, and a lot of people don't give an answer or answered some things that couldn't be coded. So in some cases, this don't work so good. I think it depends really on the target population. Yeah.
Actually, to this one. In your, as you also had the closed-ended and the open-ended versions, and did you and they were both asked to the same people? So did you see some like when coding overlapping or?
The most answers are overlapping between closed answer categories and open answers. In the most cases, the people said the same, but of course, I'm not sure how many, but some of the people gave another answer in the open answer field, in the most cases, a longer answer, or this thing of give two different answers. I think this was the most common answer. This what not fit the categories was that people say, okay, I have more than one gender, I have two genders, for example, transgender and non-binary. Yeah, but I think in this publication we have a short overview about the answers of the open answer field and the closed answer categories. Yes, and also, of course, it also depends on the coding, because you have the open answers, and then you have to decide what categories you make afterwards. And as I said, in the most cases it's easy, but in some cases it's really hard to make a category out of a very long answer of people. But it's important that it was an LGBTQI survey. In the most population-based surveys, I think a lot of people will only write male or female in the field, and this is, yeah.
Comment by Silke Schneider from Vries, who shared a report on the use of sex and gender in UK data from the Social Research Institute at UCL. Share. There was a comment.
Okay. Okay. I thought, okay, what was the question? Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think in the US and also in the UK and sometimes in the US, there is a lot more research about the topic, and also in some cases some censuses and so on integrated questions, non-binary questions on gender in their surveys. So there are a lot more data about the topic compared to Germany. And for example, the micro census used the male-female diverse item now, but don't use the diverse category for analysis because the number of cases is not so high, and they are not sure if all answers are right, and so they don't use these data in the most analysis. So yeah.
Would you say it makes sense to do like quantitative research on this topic, given that we have problems with sampling? We need to go to non-probability sampling approaches. We have, at least when we have probability samples of the general population, super low numbers, and yeah, there are so many issues when it comes to doing quantitative analysis. So is this something where you would say maybe we should rather stick to qualitative approaches?
No, absolutely not. I think, of course, we have not the best data situation, and I think in the most paper I wrote about the topics, I have some kind of limitation section in there. I write, okay, these are problematic in the data, this is not so good measured, and so on. But I think it's important that LGBTQI people are visible in our society and also visible in research and in all parts of research. Of course, qualitative research is more common about the topic and can be handle the gender identity and sexual identity, of course, in a more sensitive way, because there are not the hard categories that we mostly used in the quantitative research. But I think it is absolutely possible to do research on this. But I think what is currently missing, especially in Germany, is a discussion about the methods and a discussion about how to measure sexual orientation and how to measure gender identity and how to integrate these people in our surveys. So I think if survey providers would more think about this and we would have a more methodical discussion on this, it would be more easy to integrate these items.
So we need more research to be able to make reliable quantitative.
Yeah, of course. I think we need more research also on the methods of measurement and also of the sampling methods and so on. I think this is one important step to go further in this research.
Can you say something about, I mean, there are other minority groups, marginalized groups where the problem is the same. We don't have registers, we have very low numbers, we don't know how to reach them, we don't know how to draw good samples. Is there a field where this where research on LGBTQI research could learn from?
Yeah, of course. I think some convenience samples are also done, for example, for migrant groups, specific migrant groups in Germany, for example. And of course, we also talk to researchers of other minority groups to hear their experiences and what they did for sampling, for example. And so absolutely, it would make sense to learn from each other, and even if the situation of the groups are not the same, I think it's also there are other minority groups that are also face discrimination and are not so visibility in the society. So of course methods could be the same in some points. Yeah.
Are there conferences or journals? I assume like at Ezra you would have like sessions on sampling or doing research with hard to reach and small populations.
Yeah, I think Ezra is a good example for a conference with a lot of research on different groups, and in the last years at ESRA, there were also but some sessions about LGBTQI research. I'm not sure if it's so common in other conferences. I think in some conferences in the US, it was in the past a topic to also exchange about this topic, but I think it's done for now. Yeah, but I think ESRA is a good example for a conference, where people discuss such topics. Yeah, but also in some methods journal maybe, but yeah, there are not so many methods paper on this topics until now, I think.
And are there sections, say, in the German Sociological Association for like sociology of sexuality, I guess?
Yeah, I think we have Germany at the DGS, we have the section for gender and woman research, something like this. And but there are mostly qualitative researchers in the section. So yeah, it's a little bit, there's no specific LGBT or qualitative exchange between the people so much. We have an mailing list on the topic together with Miriam Fischer and Verena Ortmans. I had this mailing list and with different researchers from different institutions interested in the topic. And so if you're interested, you can write me an email and I put you on the list. And there's a possibility to exchange a little bit and maybe say, okay, here's an interesting conference or an interesting paper or something like this. And what we also, of course, did and do is organizing conference sessions, for example, at ESRA or the DGS Congress to make the topic more prominent. And I think a lot of survey institutes are also interested in the topic because all of them have to measure at least gender in a way. So I think it's, should be more general interest, yeah.
I have one last question to also the social media recruitment. Did you encounter any comments or anything below, and did you kind of see whether people were more commenting more positively or more negatively, or whether there was any reaction to your direct study there, and also depending on where you posted it?
Yeah, we had some comments, mostly negative comments, because I think if people think, okay, it's positive, they give maybe a like or something like this. And when they comment that were mostly negative comments, we deleted the comments because we don't want that the respondents, which are mostly LGBT, see those comments, these negative comments about this population. I'm quite now not sure if was different between Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, but you could not deactivate comments directly, because I was wondering whether this could be an issue. But if you deleted it, that's already.
Yeah, I think right now you can do it. I'm not sure right now if it was the case in 2019 and 2021. But there were, of course, some comments, but it wasn't the case that we had a new comment every minute or something like this. It was okay, and we could handle it. But I think in the many topics, also surveys on migration or something like this experience such hate comments or negative comments, something like this. And yeah.
Thank you so much. I learned so much also here.
Thank you.
I'm grateful for the examples you also gave, like question examples. I mean, for us to suggest to be included. I was just curious, so you included them in your surveys and you pre-tested them, like on gender identity, and did you do any cognitive pre-testing, or maybe you can say more how you pre-tested?
And the most cases we only did a little pre-test survey. We had a small survey before we started our survey and looked on the answers of the people. We also gave our questionnaires to LGBTQI activists, for example, or organizations, and asked them for feedback. I think for the ZEP example, there is some kind of pre-test result online. It's was part of the ZEP ES sample. There are some pre-test results, and also the Freda study did a pre-test on the sexual orientation question, and no problems or something like this. We used the item like we designed it, and what all the time happens is that people comment our items, not so much in the DEP or Freda or something like this, but in our online surveys, we had all the time people who comment our gender questions and also sexual orientation question. And for example, one point is that we use transgender as answer category, and this could be a little bit critical or seen critical, because if you think about gender identity, transgender is not really in this sense a gender identity. It's more that you don't identify with the sex assigned at birth. So this is the case why we use the two-step approach. But so a lot of people, or not a lot, but some people say, okay, don't use this transgender category for the gender identity question. So that would be maybe a result for next surveys, think again about if we should use the transgender category or not.
Let me think again, Lisa, for this very insightful talk. I think we learned a lot on this very important topic. So thanks again for coming to Mannheim.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Next event in the Social Science Data Lab will be on April the 30th by Stefan Zins from the Institute for Employment Research. We'll talk about analyzing survey data with weights, a practical introduction. Thanks for joining, and see you next time.